my first topic today, we were going to discuss, or I was going to discuss Microsoft Azure. Do you know what Microsoft Azure is?
I do. Yep.
What would you say Azure is?
So Azure is like that's their database platform. Is that what that is?
Yeah, so Azure, I would describe Azure as Microsoft's data center for rent.
Mm-hmm.
To everybody and anybody. And when you are a Microsoft 365 subscriber, even if you have a single user account that you're going to do, hosted email with Microsoft 365, you're going to do some files on SharePoint, you're going to use their Teams Professional. They carve out a slice of Azure for you. And yes, you can host databases there, but you can also host what they call hosted machines or virtual machines. So you can spin up servers, you can spin up workstations in the cloud. What else can you do? Oh, the one thing that I like a lot is you can use Azure. You could put Microsoft's Active Directory service, which again, your Microsoft 365 subscription rides on top of Active Directory, Microsoft's Active Directory service. That's how they manage user accounts, and it's kind of not really transparent to most 365 users. It's more of an admin function. But once you're in that Active Directory service, you can actually then use Azure Active Directory as what's called an identity provider.
Okay.
And this is something that we implemented internally last year, and it's fantastic. I think we have somewhere between 5 and 20 business softwares that we use to run our company. And fortunately, all of them now are all web or cloud-based software as a service, SaaS, software as a service. And most of the vendors now it's like multi-factor authentication. Like when MFA first came out, like you have to wait for the vendor to implement that functionality and feature so then you can benefit from it. Well, similar to that, there's a technology called single sign-on, which I may have mentioned before in previous episodes, but single sign-on allows you to bring your own identity provider to your software vendor's product. Okay. And so if you have an accounting software, or practice management software, or a CRM software, you can, even though those softwares have their own user databases that you can create users and passwords in to access that software, you can, once you have the software set up, you can go in there if they provide it and say to the software, okay, we're no longer going to use your internal user database. We're going to subordinate our account with your product to use our identity provider. And Google, you can use Google as an identity provider, Azure Active Directory as an identity provider, LastPass, Jump Cloud. There's a ton of them. It's a standard. So, a lot of cloud online vendors provide the functionality. Azure is probably one of the most popular. So you basically tell the software, okay, we're going to use our Azure Active Directory as our identity provider, and just read that user database in Microsoft 365 to bring in user accounts in your software. And the benefit of that is you kind of have a central point of managing your user accounts. And the really key benefit of that is kind of a single point of control for user access to your software. So, I think we have, 20 or more people now in the company, and I've been doing a lot of HR admin work, adding users, dropping some users. And if you have 15 or 20 pieces of software, creating a user account for a new employee in every single piece of software, becomes pretty laborious. So you can imagine, you have 20, 50, 100, however big business is. So this single sign-on technology really allows you to just manage your software so much faster. And then it's nice too, because if you have to make a termination, you just have a single point, you turn it off, and that will kill the user's access across all the software that support it.
Okay. And most of those software, they'll support the Azure, the single sign-on?
Yeah, I mean, the two primary providers, well, it's standards based. So they technically will support what's called a SAML, SAML. It's an acronym. I can't regurgitate it right now, but it is a standard. So technically, if you're not on Azure or Google Workplace as an IDP, identity provider, and you know how to read between the lines, you can probably use any SAML supported IDP.
Okay.
But the problem I'm seeing is not every software vendor supports SSO, which is really unfortunate. So if you see or use a piece of software that you want SSO supported, take the time, make the feature request, press the software vendor, tell them this is important to you. Otherwise, they focus their energy on other features that their community, user community, is calling for. They do listen. I can't stress that enough. We really are in a really interesting period where software development, large software companies and small alike are listening to user feedback. So, support for SSO is not ubiquitous yet, but it's coming. And then the other thing that's really obnoxious is they seem to treat SSO as a premium or enterprise class feature. So, if you're a solo or you've got 3 people in your company, and, you could still benefit from single sign-on because it still greases the wheels for the employees and the users to walk, in and out of all the software that you're using. But they seem to treat SSO as like an enterprise class feature. And I really hope that mindset shifts. It really should be like baked into the base functionality of all the software. Just like multi-factor authentication is not a premium feature. It should be built in. So
all of your employees have to use that same single sign-on for all your software?
yeah. So once they authenticate with the IDP, they can then just walk right into whatever software they go to. So we have a couple, even Microsoft Office on the web has an app launcher. So if you are in any of the Microsoft 365 products, you have the square icon on the top left corner. That's the app launcher. We pin all of our other software in there. So if you start your day in Microsoft Outlook in the web, then you hit that app launcher and you can then go into any other corporate software that we've published to the users. And because they've already authenticated with multi-factor authentication and everything with Microsoft 365, when they click the link to the next piece of software, it passes that authentication into the software, and you just walk right in. You're at the home page of that. So
go
ahead.
What happens if a user tries to sign into software using their Google sign-on or their Facebook sign-on or something like that?
Some software will let you link your identity to other identity providers like Facebook, Apple, Google. Some software, the administrator can prevent that from happening. So really that functionality is provided by each respective vendor. And your IT admin would want to make choices as to whether they want that or not.
Yeah. And you would probably not want that, correct? Because it'd be more difficult for you to terminate the
No,
employee?
because the core user account is linked to the corporate identity.
Okay.
So if they said, okay, well, I want to log into Zoho CRM using my Facebook identity, they would link those two identities and both authentication would work. But if you killed the corporate identity, that is the underlying account with the vendor. So that's how that would probably work. The one comment I was going to say is with single sign-on, it becomes single point of attack or single point of failure. So if your corporate identity is compromised, then you see the obvious problem there, right?
Yes.
So it's important that if you're going to use single sign-on, that you're properly managing and configuring your corporate identity provider.
Yeah, I would say that's for sure. And so most of your clients are doing that same process?
No, it's still early days.
Okay.
It's so funny. Like sometimes I so often feel like me personally and the practices that we do for our company, I feel like we're often late to the dance because
Mm,
I'm a member of a lot of peer groups and things. And SSO is not new. SSO has been around for maybe 10 years or so.
mm,
And I just kept putting it off because A, it wasn't ubiquitous, and B, the configuration was overly complex. The learning curve was way too steep. And then and number three is I subscribe to the notion that the single point of failure from a security standpoint was concerning. So it wasn't until last year when the business imperative was we were losing productivity in the complexity of maintaining separate user databases in every single product. So I kind of went to the drawing. I was starting to see the pains. Like new employees were coming into our company, and I think we lost a couple new employees early on because like it was just the learning curve was too steep
Oh, really?
to use our tool set.
Hmm.
You'd be surprised at how many even technical people still struggle with something as simple as like registering an account, or it's the burden, it's the administrative burden, and certainly the non-technical employees forget it. Like we've been building out our sales and marketing team over the last couple of years, and when they were seeing like, okay, I got to create a username account in this software and this software and this software and this software, and every software was providing a different experience, um, it was, we had a couple people wash out fairly quickly, and I'm pretty sure that I could tell that it was just there was the pain of entry. You know what I mean?
Mm. Did they mention that on their
On their
exit?
exit. I think maybe one did, but again, during the training, like I could tell that it was labored. So it was like
Yeah.
it was because don't forget, registering a user account in 10 pieces of software includes registering multi-factor authentication with 10
Mm,
pieces of software, and that was it was a challenge. It was a challenge. So that was the business imperative that led me to go back to SSO, single sign-on, and look at it as a possible solution for our company. And then me and the technical team here, we studied ourselves on the technology, on the implementation of it, and then we rolled it out. And as we were rolling it out, the benefit just became so obvious. It was
mm.
like, oh my God, you just log into your email and then you just start launching apps and you're just in.
Right.
It
Right.
was, and then of course on the HR side, if somebody leaves and you just, when you disable their account in the corporate IDP, it just kills them across the whole suite of
Yeah.
software. So
Right. And do you set a time limit, like a timeout? So if what's like the industry standard there? Like if they're not using an app, it logs them out after 2 hours or 4 hours or.
yeah, that's again a functionality that every software vendor has to provide,
Mm,
and unfortunately those aren't universally done well either. So it's the security implementation of the security landscape relies so much on each individual vendor kind of getting it right,
yeah.
and that's why for us, we're like feedback requests with our vendors all the time. We're constantly saying like, hey, this security mechanism isn't good enough. Like you gotta, and it would be like a non-security based piece of software too. So like they're looking at us like, hey man, we're just dealing with like, some whatever software like Canva. If you're doing like, imagine, what Canva is, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a graphic design tool, but imagine like a guy like me sending an email feed to the dev team being like, your security is inadequate. And they're like, you're just making posters here. Like,
I know.
but that still doesn't preclude every company and every software from
Yeah.
maintaining a security focused culture for their development,
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm curious to see what Canva uses.